Authority. And it will not escape note that in celebrating his preferment, his wife has dressed him in a beautiful bottle green shirt, matching mask, and matching green tie. So you have our congratulations, Senator Morris. Statement by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: Ministry paper numbers 74, 75, 76, 77, and 78 respectively, dated April 12, 2021, April 19, 2021, April 26, 2021, and and May 3, 2021 respectively. Also, Ministry paper number 78 of 2021 entitled Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement of the Agro-Investment Corporation for the year ended March 31, 2017. Agro-Investment Corporation Annual Report for the year 2016-2017. Special Report to Parliament on the status of statutory declarations. Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement of the Culture, Health, Arts, Sports, and Education, Chase, for the financial year 2021-2022. Annual Report on Audited Financial Statement of the Toll Authority for the financial year 2019-2020. Annual Report of the Montego Bay Convention Center for the year 2016-2017. And the Annual Report of the Montego Bay Convention Center for the year 2017-2018.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 26th day of October 2021, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Emergency Powers Act and for Connected Matters was passed in the House of Representatives. I also have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 3rd day of November 2021, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Trafficking in Persons, Prevention, Suppression and Punishment Amendment Act was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marissa Dalarimpa Philibert, CD, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bills.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. Both?
Of both, Mr. President.
A bill shortly entitled the Emergency Powers Amendment Act 2021 read a first time, and a bill entitled the Trafficking in Person Prevention, Suppression and Punishment Amendment Act 2021 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bills. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Emergency Powers Act and to provide for connected matters, and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions. Senator Morris.
You had approved the questions?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Mr. President, at the expiration of 21 days, I beg to give notice that I'll ask the Leader of Government Business and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade the questions tabled in my name. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
At the same time, Mr. President, at the last sitting, the questions are for me, but I have not received the written answers. So I would be grateful.
I'd asked the minister about them, and I'm assured that while they are not. I discussed the matter with the minister, and in due course she has undertaken to endeavor that you will get some response, but it's not today. I'm sorry, Senator Morris. Minister, maybe it's best if you just. What I understand is that the soft copy will be provided in due course.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, they are. Yes. Yes. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister, you could identify the course of action that you plan to take today, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is a bit of an unusual day, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation, recognizing the unusual circumstances. It is intended for us to commence the sitting with the Emergency Powers Amendment Act, which will be opened by Senator Samuda, who has just taken charge of the bill. The bill having been circulated last week, and members made aware that we would intend to take it through all its stages since we did not sit last week. But we will adjourn the sitting to allow a special sitting of the House of Representatives in order for them to take an act to amend the Road Traffic Act, which will be presented. We will reconvene a sitting of the Senate once the sitting of the House has terminated. We will start a new sitting, and we will take that act that has been passed through its stages. It will have been circulated to all members by then. And again, I thank members in advance for their cooperation. And then we will thereafter continue with the agenda that had originally been set for today.
It's not that you're going to have a new sitting, it will be you're going to suspend.
No, we will suspend the debate, and then we will adjourn.
Suspend the debate and adjourn.
And adjourn to allow the sitting of the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Once that sitting has completed, we will have a new sitting of the Senate that will reprise the original agenda, but also take the act to amend the Road Traffic Act. Because we're unable to circulate that before, because clearly it would need to go through that other process. So in that context, of course, I anticipate that our sitting could be prolonged today, but also would prevail upon, insofar as it is possible, members to be generous to our colleagues, especially those who intend to do their State of the Nation today, that they would not present too late in light of the agenda before us. Thank you, Mr. President.
My understanding is that the session for the lower house is to begin at 11 o'clock.
Yes, Mr. President.
So we would have to adjourn at 5 to 11 to allow.
Would we have a little bit of room, Mr. President, as they ensure that they have a quorum, or is it that you would wish us to adjourn on the dot of 11?
Let me just consult with the clerk.
Thank you.
So, Madam Minister, I am instructed, advised that we should adjourn at 5 to 11, as the notice says 11 for the lower house, and the 5 minutes will offer them time to sanitize. So
noted and so guided, Mr. President. I would therefore allow Senator Samuda to take the floor to open the debate on the emergency powers, with your leave.
thank you very much. Senator Samuda.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Emergency Powers Act and to provide for connected matters and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Members should have heard the question. In favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, Minister Samuda.
Mr. President, I rise this morning to commence the debate on an act to amend the Emergency Powers Act and to provide for connected matters. This is with a view of having it passed today. Mr. President, I am guardedly optimistic that the reference to connected matters won't have us all over the place this morning. And the act is a simple but consequential one. Now, I think it useful to start by highlighting the following, similar to the track that the debate would have taken in the lower house. For colleagues and for those watching, the Emergency Powers Act and Emergency Public Security Act were enacted in 1938 and 1939, respectively. The Senate will appreciate that these laws are long overdue for much-needed reform. The government of Jamaica is taking steps to undertake reform of these and similarly outdated laws. Recall that we had started the updating of penalties, a project which continues across all ministries with guidance from the Legal Reform Department of the Ministry of Justice. The Legal Reform Department, as Minister Chuck would have told us in the lower house, is being re-engineered to increase the resources required for them to take a more proactive role in law reform. Within the next few weeks, the submission should make its way to Cabinet and be approved for plans for retooling of this very critical department. With respect to the bill before the Senate today, I must highlight that their submission to the Parliament today is further evidence of this mission to update our laws. The amendments are small but important. We are constrained in our plans for further reform at this point because, as you are aware, there is an appeal in the Court of Appeal that touches and concerns the application of the Emergency Powers Act. The decision has been taken, however, to do these outstanding amendments before the Senate to bring the acts in line with the Constitution. These amendments should have been made in 2013 when the Charter was enacted. We cannot, I think, waste too much time on why the omission. However, the courts have since pointed it out. Your attention is invited, colleagues, firstly, to Clause 2 of the bill, which now includes the definition, period of public disaster, to reflect similar definition in section of the Charter. Additionally, the reference to Section 26 of the Constitution has been amended in Section 20. This is because Section 26 was repealed upon an enactment of the Charter. A similar amendment was made in the Emergency Public Security Act. The penalty provisions in the Emergency Powers Act was also amended, and you will see in Clause 3 of the bill. A new provision has been included, colleagues. This will give the relevant minister power to change the penalties by order, subject to affirmative resolution. As was stated earlier, the revision of all outdated laws is high on the agenda of this government, and it is my commitment and the commitment of colleagues on this side that in the coming months, more proposals will be brought to the upper and lower house of the Parliament for its consideration. Colleagues, we know that sometimes these things take too long. I think it's fair to say that this one definitely should have reached us long before. However, we are here today, and at the appropriate time, I will ask colleagues to support the amendments. Now, I know it is perhaps overly optimistic of me to assume that we wouldn't discuss the application of these laws, as they have been the subject of much debate, certainly in this chamber, since 2018, when the application that was used was one of the pillars of our security strategy. Mr. President, though that is not the focus of this very short but consequential bill, I think it's important just to remind colleagues why we're having this discussion. You know, I looked at the presentations from DPM Chang, I looked at Minister Chok's presentation, I looked at the rebuttal from the Leader of the Opposition, and I think sometimes we lose focus in the very important legal debates, because matters of constitutionality are not to be taken lightly, matters of legality are not to be taken lightly. But one must remember why we are where we are. Jamaica has had a problem with serious and violent crimes, particularly murder, for over 30 years. There was a brief reprieve for a decade or so, but generally it has been a black eye on this nation since independence. But certainly in the last 30 years it has been particularly problematic. The rest of the world has an average of 6.1 murders per 100,000 citizens. In this region, the average is approximately 17.2 per 100,000. Now, Jamaica, certainly since about 1999, has had a murder rate that has bounced between 40 and as high as 56 per 100,000. When the decision was taken to use this measure as a pillar of our security strategy, it was taken, and colleagues will remember, first and applied rather first in St. James. At that point, at the end of 2017, the murder rate in St. James had gotten to 186 per 100,000. Now, colleagues, these rates are frightening, and I can go into the rates of murder by police division. All police divisions that have had states of emergency and the law applied as a crime-fighting strategy. Mr. President, in 2020, the murders in the Kingston Eastern Police Division were 77 per 100,000. 197 per 100,000 in Kingston Central. 172 in Kingston Western. 77 per 100,000 in St. Andrew South. And 78.5 in St. Andrew Central. Mr. President, I don't want anyone listening to have the impression that these rates were unique to this year. They were almost identical to where they were in 2005 and 2006. So the truth is, 15 years later, we have not accepted as a nation that our murder problem is indeed of epidemic proportions. We have not accepted as a nation that this indeed constitutes an emergency, or so one would think. It was the subject in the lower house of some discourse within the debate of the consensus on crime, which was signed, I believe, in August of 2020. It was signed after much debate and much consultation. It was signed by the private sector, the NGOs, the church, the government, and indeed the opposition. Now, one of the, I think, most important pillars of that consensus on crime was the acceptance that at murder rates above 32 per 100,000 colleagues, it was need for extraordinary security measures, including the use of the army. Now, what was the source of much discourse and discussion and debate? And I think perhaps in hindsight, maybe we should have been more detailed on what this use of the army looked like, because it has again come up in the lower house. There was certainly no misunderstanding on our side in terms of what that meant. I think the public, they have said so in public opinion polls, they have said so in the electoral process. The public believes that a rate of murder of 32 per 100,000, Mr. President, is an emergency. And the public expects an appropriate response. It is this administration's position that the use of a state of emergency to bring murders down is an appropriate use of the Emergency Powers Act. Mr. President, you know I don't interrupt you when you speak, you know. No, but the bill is about the Emergency Powers Act, so I'm speaking about its application. And I will be right on time with the clock, Mr. President. The important thing, Mr. President, and we won't get into much of the issues, certainly the ones before the court, but Mr. President, the important thing, and I think for historical correctness, is that leaders have stood on this side and on that side and have cried out and given statements and commitments to seek peace. You can go back to statements in this House in 1966. I can go back to statements in this House in 1976. I can go back to statements in 1993. I can go back to statements which are all in the file in 2004, 2005. And peace has been at the center of these calls and these commitments. Declaration and use of this act in seeking peace has to be something that I believe both sides form consensus around. And I'm hopeful that through the course of this debate today, Mr. President, that we will agree not just on the passing of this legislation, but on how it has been used and how it will be used in the future. Should it please you, Mr. President?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, in order to allow the opposition, of course, to respond appropriately, and in light of your earlier guidance that we should adjourn at 5 minutes to the hour, I would propose that at this point it might be better for us to suspend the debate, Mr. President. So my question would be whether we may suspend the debate.
Members would have heard the question. That is to say that the debate on the Act to amend the Emergency Powers Act be suspended for a time to be fixed. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, might I further ask that the Senate be adjourned to a time to be fixed later this afternoon?
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? This Honourable Senate now adjourns for a time to be fixed later today. Thank you very much.